Hi there, Twitter friends. It's Atul here again, and really delighted to have with us once again this week Mark McCourt, who will be answering any question you have on maths education. But to give it a bit of a theme and get you started, thought I'd love to know some of the books that have inspired Mark. So over to you, Mark. Yeah, take it away.
So I don't have. I've got lots of maths books, but where I am at the moment, I don't have all of the ones that I'd recommend. But I've just grabbed a few that I thought would be useful to people. So I'll just start. What should I start with? I'll start wading through. These are in no particular order, so I'm not saying this is my top recommendation or anything like that. But the first one I've just picked up at random is Fundamental Constructs, which is Sue Johnston Wilder and John Mason. Really good book, this. I would imagine lots and lots of people know this book. And one of the reasons I really like this book is it's a very easy read. Though actually I've said that to several people and they've said, no, it isn't. But I think it is, actually. I think it's a very easy read. And really accessible. And what Sue and John did with this, there are some really important, as far as I'm concerned, there were some really important texts, really important pieces of research in maths education that exist. And when you're first starting out, unless you have a really good teacher training, which is not very likely, when you're first starting out, knowing where to go to find those books and those pieces of research that are really important, it's pretty tricky. So this book here, this Fundamental Constructs book, this book here, Sue and John, in the first half of it, they go through the important theories of learning. And, all the way back to Plato. And then because it's John Mason, it's very heavily biased towards a kind of constructivist thing, which I'm perfectly okay with. All books I'm going to talk about just now have a common theme of mastery, which will probably make sense being from me. And the guy that kind of kicked mastery off to begin with, Carlton Washburn, who started the model. The two big influences for Carlton Washburn starting that model in the 1920s. Well, first of all, you've got Aristotle. And then secondly, you've got John Dewey. And Carlton Washburn went to a John Dewey school. And in education, people will know John Dewey as the father of constructivism, I guess. So obviously he gets a mention in this. But then what the guys do is they go through really important texts, summarize really important things, and then it's almost like this book is so they've collected all these different texts together. It's almost like this book can act as a signposting book throughout your career. You can read this book and it stands as a book really well. You can read it through. The story makes a lot of sense. First half is theories of learning, and then the second half is how you might get children to engage with learning. But I quite like it as this. I used to say this to trainee teachers. This is like a signposting book that will send you off to really important pieces of work in maths education as you read through it, and then you can go off and find that source. So Skemp gets a lot of mention in here, and you can go off and find Skemp's paper and read that, and so on. So that's the first one, Fundamental Constructs.
Right. Yeah. So also just to reassure anyone who's tuned in, I've got my pen and paper, but I realize you'll probably make a list of this so that we can publish it, so that people don't have to make notes. But yeah, this is not one I have, and so I'd love to get a hold of it as a signposting book and send me off on various different journeys and tangents. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's what it is really. It's Fundamental Constructs is like a book of book recommendations, and those recommendations in there are excellent, I would suggest. So I was digging around the shelves of what I have available where I am at the moment, and Fundamental Constructs was sitting right next to this book, which is again Sue and John's. This is Sue Johnston Wilder and John Mason again, and this is Designing and Using Mathematical Tasks. It's a really short book, really thin. Right? So Fundamental Constructs is a bit of a beast, and Designing and Using Mathematical Tasks is really quite short. It's, again, I'm not sure if this is insulting to say it's a really easy read. I think actually it's praising of how good they are at writing. But it is a really easy, quick read. And there are some incredibly important things in this book, like models of learning and instruction. So, for example, there's the model here, see, experience, master. That's one model. Doing, talking, recording is another model. Manipulating, getting a sense of, and articulating is another model. And scaffolding and fading is another model. And anyone who's read work that I've written will recognize quite a lot of that stuff. This is the book. So in my book, Teaching for Mastery, where I talk about fading, this is the book that kind of signposts off to, I should read more about fading, I should find out more about fading, look at the efficacy of it. There's not much about it in here, but just signposts you off to, that's something you should explore a bit more. And this whole thing of, the models are things like see, experience, master, these punchy little titles for models. So plug now, my new book is Teach, Do, Practice, Behave. And that's kind of inspired by things like that, where you get these models that are easy to remember. And other people, do those sorts of 4-word books. But yeah, Teach, Do, Practice, Behave is the one I'm releasing this year. And then alongside that on the shelf, now I really like this book. And I find it really odd that not many maths teachers like this book, which I probably shouldn't say because I think the author's amazing. This is again by John Mason, Learning and Doing. And what this book is a book of actual mathematical tasks to do yourself, to get into them and do the work that's in the book, to try them out and do mathematics yourself. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed doing the tasks. It's quite an old book, it's been around a while. And I find it very odd. I was talking to Dan Piercy recently about his new book, Mathematical Beauty, which is brilliant as well, and that should be on the list. And I was talking to him about this idea that mathematics is beautiful and just doing mathematics yourself is a worthwhile thing to do. And I've always found it very odd in education that, the English teacher, they are writing a novel in the background or doing some poetry. And the drama teacher does Amdram and Panther, and the sports teacher's on a five-a-side team. And the art teacher has, an exhibition in the local library. And, the geography teacher is literally nobody knows what geography teachers do, but they're doing whatever they do. And everybody else, it's always struck me that everybody else in all of the other subjects, all of the other disciplines in schools, recreationally do their subject just for the sake of it, just because they bloody love it, Yeah, it's quite rare. Maybe not the people watching this on Twitter, because Twitter maths teachers are not the real world. But it is quite rare to meet maths teachers who recreationally do mathematics just for the hell of it, just because they love it, enjoy it. I think there's something really sad about that. If you don't recreationally do mathematics, if you don't enjoy it, if it doesn't flow from you and it doesn't excite you, do you really have the right to expect 30 children in front of you to get excited about this subject and get all interested in and fall in love with it? If you don't, I'm not sure you can expect that of children. But anyway,
yeah,
that book, John's got a couple of books like this. But this book here, I picked this one because it's really short, it's a really thin book, and it's just got some lovely little tasks in, which I guess you could ask your pupils to do, right? But I think do them yourself. Pick the book up and do the mathematics yourself. Work your way through it. See what comes out of these. And some of the, where there's commentary on what one mathematician, in this case John Mason, there's some commentary on, as a mathematician, this is where he takes this task. It doesn't mean it's where you'll take this task. You might find out something entirely different, do completely different things from that. So learning and doing mathematics. I think it's really important to be mathematical. as a maths teacher. So I thought that's an interesting one.
Yeah, no, I've seen it on the maths cons on the Friday night drinks, for example. There's a few of us who sit by the pub with the pint glass, and we have puzzles and things. And recreational maths doesn't have to be like very difficult maths. It just has to be some like the kind of maths you like doing, which it could include puzzles or anything.
Yeah, and just anything that prompts you to be mathematical. And maybe partly what's going on there is maybe there's a different view of what being mathematical is. A lot of people will do maths. They'll answer some questions, get some ticks and crosses and whatever, and right and wrong, whatever. It's not really how I see the subject at all. Being mathematical, you can be mathematical with anything, any prompt, anything that makes you curious, makes you want to ask questions about it, makes you want to pursue a line of questioning and get under the skin of something. So like you say, on Friday night at the maths conf, you see people doing that. The maths teacher get-togethers that we sometimes have in London and in Glasgow. People will come together and just spend the day doing maths, getting drunk as well, but doing maths at the same time, which I think is a good combination, just for the sake of doing it. But I am pretty convinced that there's something in it. I'm pretty convinced that your children can sense it from you in the classroom, that they know if you don't like your subject. They know if you're not interested in your subject. So yeah,
what if
things
it's,
like that.
Yeah, I know you've done a poll on Twitter actually. What do you think a mathematician is? And quite often people think, I think everyone's a mathematician. But you often get these answers where you think like people at university doing maths are mathematicians, or even sometimes I get tutors saying they're not mathematicians. They teach maths, but they're not mathematicians. So I think that's a thing you're alluding to, right? So,
yeah, it's very, very common if you survey the profession that there is a very large number of maths teachers who would not count themselves as a mathematician, which is a shame, I think. You can be mathematical as long as you're curious, you're interested in things, you enjoy getting stuck, you enjoy, following lines of questioning, fighting with things. That whole thing of wanting to be stuck, finding it exciting to not know the answer.
Yeah, live streaming.
Anyone can do that. It's a frame of mind, right? It's a disposition. It's not necessarily working through a bunch of questions and getting them right or wrong. So yeah, I thought that was a good one to choose. I did that deliberately. So there's a bunch of John Mason, Sue Johnson Wilder books there. I've got others of sort of similar vein. And there's quite a lot in that writing. There's quite a lot of writing in the group of people who would be around the ATM, who have this view of mathematics education that would be derided as being constructivist. That people like to have a go at, they love setting up these false fights in education. On one hand you've got the constructivists, and on the other hand you've got the direct instruction guys, and they pretend that these two things never meet, and they're like fighting with them. So what I thought I'd do is also take off the shelf this thing. This is a bloody weighty tome. It's from 1991. This is called Theory of Instruction. And this is by Siegfried Engelmann. It's a very big old book, this thing here. And in this book, he outlines this theory of instruction, this theory of direct instruction, in great detail across many different subject areas. And most maths teachers would probably know Engelmann's other work, so Successful and Confident Students, which is a short little book about direct instruction and about mastery again. So both of these books have a very strong connection to mastery as well, which goes back to the same stuff that those previous books we're talking about. So I highlight these as well, because one of the things that strikes me in education as being unhelpful is to pretend that there are these battles that people are fighting, that and never the twain shall meet. That you should. There's one camp that says, look, let's just script out what we say to the pupils, put that knowledge in their head, make them replicate it, and that's it done. That's that sorted. And then another camp who say, no, children should discover everything, and it's just nonsense. I've never actually met a real breathing maths teacher in real classrooms who believes that. Sure, there are people on the fringe, kind of radicals who promote these views. I've never met a classroom teacher who thinks that. Classroom teachers always say, whenever it's appropriate, you do the appropriate thing, right? Sometimes I want my children to discover something. I've created a scenario for them. I know what they're going to discover. They think it's novel. They think that they're coming up with their own ideas. But actually, I manipulated the scenario such that I knew the line of inquiry they'd follow. I knew where it'd take them, When teachers ask children to put bits of string around lots of circular things, teachers aren't going into that thinking, I wonder what the hell will happen here. They know what will happen. It's not some free, just go off and do thing. But there is something important about the children undertaking that activity at that point, in the same way that sometimes it's really important that you cut to the chase, and as a teacher, you instruct pupils and you make them familiar with techniques and show them techniques in the full range of their applicability, full range of places where these techniques will be appropriate, and then maybe get them to work on some stuff. So I wanted to put both of those two piles up at the same time, a kind of constructivist discovery pile and a direct instruction pile, just to highlight the fact that that argument is nonsense. And I'm sure there'll be people on Twitter saying, no, there's only direct instruction works or only discovery learning works. But there won't be any teachers who say it. There won't be any classroom teachers who say it. Because classroom teachers know what they're doing, and they know, of course there are times where I'm going to tell them stuff. And of course there are times where I'm going to give them scenarios where they think they're working things out for themselves. I think that's an important thing to do. It also raises the discussion around why are we doing this. There are really strong arguments that if you're in year 11, or you've got some pupils in year 11, and it's January and they're screwed, their grades are terrible and they're not going to get the currency they need to go out into the world and be autonomous and be successful. There's a really strong argument to say, well, somehow, somewhere along the line for the last 11 years, we've messed this up. So what I'm going to do right now is get as much stuff into them as I possibly can so that they can perform on that exam. I know, it has no long-term benefit, the performance that they're doing. I know it doesn't change the way they view mathematics. Well, it might do, I suppose. But there's no sort of educational benefit to doing that, no learning benefit to doing that. But having a grade 5 at GCSE is bloody helpful. Yeah. And there is a time and a place. Things like Engelmann's work and things like Project Follow Through were about interventions, right? They were about intervening with the most, as Engelmann referred to them, the most needy pupils, which I think is a rather odd term, but there we go. There is a time and a place for saying we're just going to pick these kids up and get them the best currency they can possibly get. But I don't think we should fool ourselves into thinking because that is the thing that we can do and it is possible, that it should be the desired outcome of a maths education. That strikes me as odd. Surely the desired outcome of a maths education is that these children leave mathematical and wanting to continue to be mathematical, wanting to continue to pursue being mathematical, whether professionally, academically, recreationally. And I'm not sure that intervention programs are very good at achieving that. You do see cases where a child has been failing for a long time, and an intervention, such as a direct instruction intervention, lifts them up to get them a grade that surprises them. And then for the first time in that child's life, they think, oh, bugger me, maybe I can do this, maybe I can pass. And then that success drives a motivation, and that motivation then drives them to be mathematical. That happens a lot. So yeah, that's two piles of books, which I think are useful. And then
Yeah, so just to be clear, that discovery learning would be like completely unplanned activities, like an extreme camp, whereas direct instruction is I know this thing, I know this is exactly how it works, I'm telling you how it works, and there's other two sort of opposite ends of the spectrum, which
but they're not really opposite ends. They're different things for different times. They choose the right tool. Teachers are bright. You choose the right time to use the right thing. So, for example, in this book here, which is Sue Johnson Wilder and John Mason I was talking about a moment ago, I don't think either of these guys would be placed in the direct instruction Engelman camp by a load of maths teachers. But in this book here, one of the models they talk about is C, Experience Master. And C, Experience Master, the C part of that is exposed to them, right? So expose them some mathematical technique. And the experience part of that is, okay, now that you've exposed this to them and maybe you've described the mathematical technique, give them familiarity with it, let them get familiar with it. And then the master part of that is, so now that they've built up this familiarity with it, allow them to work with these techniques in a range of ways such that they find proper utility with them and proper ability to reuse them and apply them in different ways. So it's not that. I mean, discovery learning, in some of its guises, in a way in which sometimes it is caricatured, which is just let the kids get on with it. And I've seen teachers do that. As an inspector, I've seen teachers do that. It's rare, though, really, really, really rare to see that happening. And it's bloody disastrous. But almost no teachers do that. Even teachers that would say, actually, what I espouse is discovery learning, what they really mean is, what they often mean is, I'm going to create scenarios where I've thought very, very carefully about these scenarios, very, very carefully about these tasks. And the tasks are designed in such a way that a normal child encountering these and playing with them and discovering with them will go in this direction. And these things will become apparent to them, and this is how they'll become enlightened. You almost never see a teacher just say to a class, here you go, get on with this, and have not thought through where this task goes and what the point of exploring it is. So yeah, I think that fight between those two camps is really unhelpful.
Yeah, I was thinking of a concrete example of this actually. So with Cuisenaire rods, I often get tutees to buy their own set, so because they have them at home and I teach them online. And one of the first thing, I suppose it could be called the discovery learning part. I show them a few. It's free play. You play with the Cuisenaire rods until you make some shapes. So I'll show them like someone's made a rabbit or a person, or write your initials, and then I set them off and I say, well, keep playing with them until something happens, and I'm waiting for that something to happen. But again, this is what that something is, of course, is at some point they'll naturally just put them in order of size or some kind of pattern, and from that point onwards I can do other stuff. But again, it seems like it's discovery and I've told them to play, and I often tell the parents it actually seems like I've just told them to play with them as much as they want, which is true, but it's done on purpose, and there's a real, like, it's not an accident, any of this. Like, as you say, we're like playing with the pieces of strings. There's always a design, guided discovery, if you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've probably seen me do the Cuisenaire session that I do, where I say to the delegates, like, do whatever you want with these, and they go off and do whatever they want. But then the slides that I have prepared, I say to them, go off and do whatever you want, but I know what you'll do, I know what you'll find out, and I know what things you'll make. And teachers are often thinking, no, he doesn't, I'm doing my own thing, this is my own creativity, this is my own stuff. And then they do things, and then I'll put slides up showing them the things that they did. I go, oh wow, because it's planned, right? Cuisenaire rods are very, very well thought out pedagogical devices. So yeah, there's planning behind it, really. So I'll just finish off.
Brilliant. Yeah, we've got
book-wise.
a few people tuning in and saying hello. No questions yet, so if you've got any question on the books or anything to do with maths, just put them up, and yeah, I'll ask Mark. I've got Paul from sunny Burnley, he says. Got Sadia. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Any questions? Judy as well. Yeah, just put them out there, and yeah, wherever you are, on Facebook, Twitter, Periscope.
Cool. Let me just finish. So this book, Children Discover Arithmetic, since we were just talking about discovery, by Catherine Stern. It's one of my favourite books ever. This is a 1944 version, I think, 1944 or 1949, something like that. It's an amazing book, and it is all about that thinking through the tasks such that when you give children these tasks, you know where it's going to take them. You know what mathematical things will become apparent to them. So I think that'd be a really good one. I think it's quite hard to get hold of nowadays. It's an excellent book, and it's where things like Cuisenaire rods and stuff like that, they're in there long before Georges Cuisenaire starts creating those, popularizing that approach. I thought it would also be worthwhile. I don't have them here with me because they're in my office. Apparently, we're not allowed to travel anywhere at the moment. So it's also worth mentioning Collaborative Learning in Mathematics, which is Malcolm Swan's book from 2006, which is just an amazing piece of research. It's really, really clever piece of research. The messages in that are important, I would suggest. And what I liked about Collaborative Learning in Mathematics, I don't know if this is still the case if you buy it, but certainly when it came out, at the back of the book, there was a CD-ROM, and on the CD-ROM there's examples of pupils' work and pupils in classrooms and things like that, so you can connect it to these real classrooms and what's going on. And then finally, one final one, I'd recommend quite a new book, and it's called Teaching Mathematics at Secondary Level by Tony Gardner. Yeah, I really, really like Tony's work anyway, but I love this book. It's he goes through talking about techniques and how you get really under the skin of a load of techniques that are important, particularly in Key Stage 3 maths, but it's applicable elsewhere as well. So that's my book stuff, Atul. And then of course, got to do a plug for that as well.
Absolutely.
My own book, Teaching for Mastery, which I think is okay as well. So,
no, it's fantastic. Obviously, I've got my own copy here with bookmarks and things, which I'll probably ask some questions based on that as well. Yeah, cool. And that's really interesting. What the secondary maths. So is there? Often we have this kind of. I've seen you talk about it as well. This false dichotomy between primary and secondary maths, where, say you have, and I have that all the time as a tutor as well. I may have someone in year 10 or year 11, and it turns out that I'd sometimes tell the parents I think they're kind of stuck in year 3 or year 4, so I have to go back to, I need to learn the mathematics to be taught in year 3. In fact, all of it, the whole lot actually. That's one of the things I'm very grateful for my CPD with LaSalle and Complete Maths, is to learn all of that, teaching that earlier maths, which is I find it intellectually far more demanding than like an A-level maths tutoring session. It's if you could just talk about that kind of, there is a false dichotomy somehow between primary and secondary maths, because it's really the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very unhelpful false dichotomy as well, that people consider there to be primary maths, secondary maths. There's just maths, and you have pupils and they are somewhere in the learning of mathematics. It's very normal to meet. Yeah, it's very normal to meet 15-year-olds who can't number 1 to 10 yet. There's loads of them that exist. So the idea that they are doing secondary maths because they're 15 is just ridiculous. Consider the whole thing as a continuum or a universe, and they're exploring that, traveling around that, and you've just got to work out where they're at. And that false dichotomy has lots of lots of outcomes that are detrimental, I think. A lot of secondary schools won't know where the maths has come from. It's very normal to meet secondary school teachers who don't realize just how sophisticated and advanced primary school mathematics is, or can be, or should be. A lot of primary kids are doing some really interesting, tricky maths, and very often you'll see year sevens being treated as a clean slate, as though they've not learned anything at all about mathematics, and teachers try to restart them. So you get that way around. But the other thing you get is that in primary schools, who likewise don't understand where this mathematics goes in the future, very often what you see is tricks and sort of shortcuts being introduced to get you through primary maths, rather than teaching methods that will hold true forever. And actually, Engelman, one of the things that he's very good on, very hot on, is what I would call forward-facing methods. So teaching everything correctly first time. The first time you meet a mathematical idea, teach it in such a way that it will hold true all the way through learning of mathematics. So not teaching maths as a series of little tricks and steps that just get you through that tiny part of maths, making sure the method holds true. And one of the reasons that often doesn't happen is because you get people treating primary maths, secondary maths separately. So, the year one teacher isn't seeing where this journey goes, or the early years teacher isn't seeing where this journey goes. And then, maybe the year six teacher is teaching it in a way that they know, okay, well, that will work on the exam paper, on the year six exam. This quick way, this quick, easy to remember way will work. And then not taking account of, actually, it's really hard to undo those misconceptions later on. It happens all the time with all sorts of stuff. You get people telling children you can't find the square root of a negative number. Teachers will tell pupils that it's not possible to find the square root of a negative number, and then someone has to undo that later, and it's really hard to undo. Whereas the teacher could have just said, when you're doing roots, the teacher could have said, because pupils are curious, maybe a pupil says to you, "What if it's negative, sir?" The teacher could have just said, "We're going to address that later on," instead of putting that misconception in the head. I'm not saying you have to necessarily say, "Okay, let's dig into that," for every curious question that's asked. But there's no excuse for saying, "Actually, I'll just tell the children multiplying by 10, you add a 0 on the end, because it will get me through this lesson, because all these questions will be of that type." So that teach everything correctly first time. Teach everything in a way that holds true. Forward-facing methods, methods that withstand the test of time. And that false dichotomy is one of the things that causes that, I think.
And you mentioned about the primary schools, or this is, I say, in year one, not knowing so for me, like in a software term, it's forward and backward compatible. Like the whole thing has to go through. But what's the approach in, say, a non-specialist? Because primary teachers have to teach all subjects, right, including maths. So presumably it's to take CPD. I know you provide very good CPD, but what's like a sort of pragmatic solution to that, if you so to speak?
It's a very tough one, because primary school teachers are teaching all year groups. There are approaches you could take. I would suggest that post year 4, or year 4 onwards, actually, that specialist teaching would be more appropriate from year 4 onwards. Before year 4, there's something extremely important about the human relationship between a young child and the adult that's working with them, continuity, the relationships that, But post year 4, that seems to tip towards, actually, the subject knowledge outweighs that relationship side of it. So let's say, post year 4 onwards, we could move towards specialist teaching, but that still leaves a bunch of year groups. One of the things I always thought would be useful would be, what if instead of having primary generalists, we had primary specialists? Now, I don't mean primary specialists as in specialists for subjects. It takes a really long time to become a primary teacher, like to be specialist primary teacher, because you are teaching all of these different subjects at the same time. And so you've got all of the subject content knowledge, all of the subject-specific pedagogical knowledge to acquire, get familiar with. So one of the things you could take away to make that process easier, and teachers don't like this, I've suggested this lots of times, teachers tend not to like this, but you could become a year specialist. Well, I don't really get why people don't. This idea is always very badly received. What if you teach year one forever and become exceptionally skilled at teaching the content that generally comes up at that level of maturation with pupils? Because then you're restricting the amount of learning that is a burden upon you. But what seems to happen is that people like to move around year groups to have a go at this and have a go at this. I think there's something about specializing that would be useful. And then you could concentrate very, very heavily on what are the pedagogic choices I need to make for teaching this kind of maturation level of mathematics or science or whatever subject it is. But yeah, it's a really tough one to fix. We don't have adequate, anywhere near adequate teacher training. How long is it? 9 months, something like that. 9 months to say you're now a specialist at teaching this subject. And if you take reception or year one, not only are you saying we need you to teach a bunch of subjects, but you're saying we need you to teach a bunch of subjects at the most difficult level. It's so hard, so much harder to teach early mathematics than it is to teach later mathematics. So much more intellectually demanding, so much more complex. To get a child to have a sense of numberness, say, that's so much more difficult than to get a child to be able to solve Pythagoras' theorem questions. So I think narrowing the burden that we put on people would be a useful thing to do. But that's never going to happen. And people don't like it.
I suppose Monique's got a question. It's completely related to what we're doing. What are the most common, most unhelpful tricks and misconceptions that are taught? You mentioned a couple already, so if there's any other ones come to mind.
Oh God, yeah, there are loads. There's absolutely loads. These are things that people are familiar with, right? Big culprits are things like in year one, we might be doing some single-digit subtraction with pupils. And pupils, especially at that age, they're like little information sponges and excitable, and they're interested. They're genuinely interested at that age. You might be doing some single-digit subtraction, and you might do what's 9 minus 5. And then you can explain what this means and look at models for what 9 minus 5 is. But invariably, whether it's just through writing something out the wrong way, as children will often do, or is there curiosity? Invariably, someone will say, what if it was 5 minus 9? What if it's the other way around, 5 minus 9? And that comes up a lot. And the most common response when children say to their teacher in year one, out of curiosity, or they wrote it the wrong way around, what if it's 5 minus 9? The most common response is, that can't be done. And that's really, really hard to unpick later, because you do need to unpick it, and not very far in the future in year 2, that you'll have those same children. And you might want to unpack that and say, I want to do 5 minus 9 now and explore that and look at models for that. But they are the same children, and they listen to you and they respect you, and they think you are the purveyor of all knowledge, that you're some really important person in their life. So if you told them you can't do 5 minus 9, it's not possible. If you tell them that, they believe you. And then later on, when you try to teach them 5 minus 9, they're sitting there thinking, well, hang on a minute. You told me this isn't possible. This can't be done. And then you get things like, this is what Siegler refers to as these interfering waves, where you have two responses available to you, or maybe more than 2 responses in the future. So maybe in year 2, I've taught you 5 minus 9. I've shown you can get to -4 by doing that. But I've also told you in year 1 that can't be done. Then what happens is that later down the line, when some question comes up randomly and that appears and they have to access their memory to attack this problem, they have these competing waves. So one wave is saying, hey, you can't do this. And the other wave is saying, you can do it, it's -4. And you have these two competing approaches, competing methods that the child has to choose from. Whereas if we just teach everything correctly first time, then that gets rid of that competing waves, gets rid of these competing methods. But there are loads of them. You could, as people have done, you could write books on this, misconceptions in mathematics. And lots of those misconceptions come from pupils literally misconceiving, right? So when they're conceiving mathematical ideas, maybe the instruction's absolutely correct and appropriate, but in their internal conception of it and in their internal creation of this mental image, they somehow do something wrong. So they misconceive it. A lot of misconceptions come from that, but a lot of misconceptions come from they were told the wrong things. And it's really hard to get rid of being told the wrong things. So anyway, there's another example, but that'd be a whole day.
I know what you mean, actually, because I specialize in this calculia tutoring, and often I get teenagers with very, very mixed up ideas of things. And it's almost the unpicking, unlearning stuff can be harder than learning it, actually, because you have to really figure out where the misconception is, what it is, and spend time breaking
and why it exists as well. They're different things, and you have to take different approaches to undo a falseness that a child has been told by someone they respect. That's a different piece of work that a teacher has to do to undoing something that a child has literally misconceived, that they've created the wrong mental image. So working out why they hold those is a really important part of what we do as well. It's really, really hard. So if we did just do forward-facing methods, at least it would get rid of one big swathe of problems that we have. So,
no, I mean, I teach. I don't just teach children. Actually, I have adults as well. So I have adults in their 50s and 60s, and often they also stop learning maths at year 2 or year 3, and then they've had misconceptions for things that they need in life, like percentages, or to do with some day-to-day stuff, really, and they've lived with those ideas for a long time. So I find like unraveling that, figuring out what they are, that can take quite some time. Actually, it's quite a challenge compared to, say, teenagers who's only been lived with the misconception for maybe 4 or 5 years, or maybe 8-9 years max. But yeah,
it's really hard with adult learners. Really tough. If you believe something to be the case for 30 years, and then suddenly your tutor is telling you actually that isn't how this works, or that's not true. They're really hard things to undo, and we can play a massive part in removing a lot of those problems as teachers, just by knowing the full curriculum, right? That's why Ofsted is obsessed with a coherent curriculum, a coherent journey through your subject, that the whole thing hangs together, the whole thing makes sense, not just the lesson you're teaching today, not just this week, this month, this term, but the whole subject. How does it all hang together, and how does it all impact? And I often say, there is as much burden on A-level teachers as well. When A-level teachers are teaching mathematics, they will often do this as well. They'll shortcut things. Maybe you're teaching the calculus and you do some little shortcuts because they'll hold true for what the pupils are doing at A level, but then they won't hold true for when they go off and do undergraduate mathematics. So it's the same burden that, if you're teaching at the highest level of school mathematics, you still need to know where does that mathematics go in the future, and make sure your methods are forward-facing there as well. So, forward-facing methods.
Forward compatible, really backward compatible. Yeah. Software. We got someone tuned in from Italy. Got Simone there. She said hello. We've got another question. It's probably the one you've been waiting for a long time. Ahmed says, big buzz around mixed ability classes. Do you think it requires more effort / training for teachers?
Does it require more effort and training? Well, it would be good if we trained teachers. That'd be a handy start, wouldn't it? If we took the training of teachers seriously instead of some 9-month course. We thought, actually, let's plot out a 10-year course and make it all hang together properly. But anyway, that's an aside. So I'm assuming the question is, if the group has a large attainment gap, is that harder to teach than a group that has a small attainment gap? Not necessarily. Every class you teach is mixed ability, unless the class is one person. Unless you're doing one-to-one tuition, then every single class is mixed ability. Human beings do learn things at different rates from different models, metaphors, examples, at different times. So they'll all be mixed ability. And you can almost guarantee that every class is mixed attainment as well. And they're not the same thing, mixed ability and mixed attainment. And this question is posed as mixed ability. But I'm assuming they probably mean mixed attainment, where the gap is large, rather than the learning rate, which is more what ability is about. I think it just comes down to task design, and then how you work with these tasks. So the one I always talk about as my favorite example of doing mixed attainment really, really well was game. And I think you can download the whole thing from the National STEM Centre, and you can see all these tasks on there. And basically what you have in something like game, a little bit like we had in coursework, you have these tasks that are very, very open. You can go off in lots and lots of different directions. But again, the task is designed such that pupils will really go off in the direction they're going to go off with. And then game provides you with a rubric to say, so if the pupils are exhibiting these behaviors or doing this mathematically, or they're showing you these kind of solutions, then they're kind of at this level. And if they're doing this, they're at this level. With really good task design, it's perfectly possible and perfectly enjoyable to do mixed classes. I've said on many interviews, most of my teaching career, I was teaching mixed ability classes, mixed attainment classes. But yeah, there are different pedagogical choices. There are different approaches that you would want to deploy. Then in a class where the attainment gap is tight, though there won't be a zero attainment gap, it just doesn't exist. But there are different dispositions that you need as a teacher, and you need to know what they are, and you need to have thought that out very carefully. But that's the same as a class that's tightly homogenized as well. You need to know what those approaches are. I get asked about mixed ability a lot, though people are really asking about mixed attainment. And one of the things I find really difficult with the debate around mixed ability is the goal that's what we should be doing. So it can be done, and it can be done really well, and it can be enjoyable for teacher and pupil. And if you have a class where the attainment gap is large, fine, go for it, do that. But what I'm obsessed with is, why the hell do we let that attainment gap get so large? Why would that be the goal? When people talk about My goal is, what I want to implement in a couple of years' time is a mixed ability approach. What they're really saying is, I believe that some children can learn well and some children cannot learn well. And I'm not up for that. I don't think that's a good goal at all. I think it's an abhorrent goal. And I would much prefer a longer term conversation that was about everyone can learn everything well. Let's lift them all up. Let's get everyone up to the top. Let's not teach to the middle, or let's not plan for a 7-year attainment gap. Let's get everyone lifted up so that they all learn the whole of school level mathematics. And that's, of course, the whole point of a mastery approach, to make sure everyone is lifted up to the top. And that's why I espouse that approach. I think the aim of, we want to teach mixed ability, I don't know how that can sit well with any educator. I don't know how it can sit well with an educator to say, I believe some children are flawed, that they cannot learn. I have real problems with that. Now, of course, you'd be practical and pragmatic about it. The fact is that you're year 7 at the moment. The fact is there is a 7-year attainment gap, and it gets larger and larger. Okay, well, you've got that situation, so you could group your classes, teach with the mastery approach. You could not group your classes, teach them the mixed ability approach. They're both fine. Both have the same outcomes academically. Pupils end up in the same place. Done well, they're both great. Done badly, they're both bloody awful, right? If you think that grouping your classes means let's give the top set a really good education and let's treat the bottom set like idiots, then I'd struggle with any educator that has that view as well. So done badly, they're both terrible. If you think mixed ability, if you think having a class with a 7-year attainment gap means that I'll just present at every one of those children what's appropriate for the middle, who wants that kind of diet? That just destroys all the hopes and aspirations of the pupils that are advanced in their mathematical attainment, and it flattens the children who are behind because it's not accessible to them. But done in a kind of game way, GAIM, not GAME, done in a kind of game way, it's great. It's really, really, really nice to be able to introduce a lesson where everyone's learning about the same thing. I think the first game lesson I ever did was, it might be called Build a Wardrobe or something like that, or maybe it's just called Wardrobe. So the lesson is about a wardrobe, which means all 30 pupils in the class are doing a lesson about a wardrobe. So nobody feels like a smart ass and no one feels thick. They all just think, hey, we're all doing the same lesson. This is cool. And then the teacher knows they're all going to get to different places, and they've planned that really carefully. Be pragmatic and be realistic about where we're at the moment, and deal with these enormous attainment gaps that we've got using either of those methods. I go for a mastery method. I just really like it. Pupil attainment is very, very high, and pupil enjoyment and engagement in mathematics is even higher. Success feels amazing. So I take that mastery approach. But if you want to do mixed ability approach, that can feel amazing too. Obviously, you can't do them both. You can't do mastery and mixed ability, but pick whichever one works for you, works for your staff. If you've got 15 members of your maths department, look at the skill set, look at the training you need, implement what you think will work, speak to the parents, speak to the children, and then go for it. But as a profession, we should be saying, well, okay, what about in 15 years' time? And I think we should be saying, well, in 15 years' time, the gap at year 7 should be indistinguishable. There should be nothing there. Of course, there'll always be a bit. No, children learn at different rates. It's not going to be the same. But it doesn't have to be 7 years. There doesn't have to be a single child in year 7 who can't count to 10. There really doesn't. So what if, as a profession, we also dealt with the long term, dealt with fixing that at the same time? What if, as a profession, we said, we're going to take these pragmatic approaches, whichever one we espouse and whichever one we believe in at the moment, and we're going to go for that. There's no difference in attainment, so they both turn out fine for kids. Kids do okay in both those systems if done well. So we'll do that. But what we're also going to do is take the view that mixed ability, that the belief that children are differently able is not acceptable to us. And instead, we're going to take the view that every child can learn the whole of school level maths. It's not hard what's on school level maths, right? You know, we used to ask 15-year-olds to do differential equations, and you know, what do we ask 15-year-olds to do nowadays to get a grade 5 at GCSE? Not very much. It's not particularly demanding, and I think we can have the attitude that they could all learn that. I'm aware I didn't answer the question, but I think the answer to the question was, you know, mixed ability is difficult, and so is teaching SETI. Doing them both well is difficult.
Yeah.
But go for the one you think works for you, your community, your teachers, what their backgrounds are. The only last thing I'd say on that, which I quite often say, is for pity's sake, please don't knee-jerk react and change things. You know, don't think it's possible to say we've been doing setted classes for 10 years and we're going to switch on mixed ability in September. You can't. You've got to take it seriously. You've got to plan for it carefully. Make sure the tasks are designed and are in place. Same the other way around. You know, if you've got a group of 10 teachers and for a decade they've all been teaching mixed ability with great effect, and they have this about them, these are the pedagogic choices that they are familiar with, please don't shoehorn them into, and now you've suddenly got to teach in this way. You know, plan for it, take a few years, trial some different approaches in the classrooms, take a few years, get them on training, and implement it when it's appropriate.
So presumably you're doing this with complete maths as well, with some schools where they may be changing from mixed attainment to a mastery approach, where it has to happen through several years. It can't be quite abrupt. Or is that what's sort of the phase-in period, or does it presumably depend on the school and the staff and everyone else?
Yeah, the network is so large that we've got people doing every sort of thing you can imagine. We've got schools that are aspirationally wishing to move from mixed ability to a setting. We've got schools through their aspiration want to move from setting to mixed ability. We've got, perhaps because of who we are and what we espouse and the work that we lead, we've got the bulk of our schools want to move from either setted or mixed ability to a mastery approach. So that's what the bulk of our schools wish to do. You know, it's what we talk about a lot. It's what we write about. It's the way in which we design the system. So obviously that's the bulk of our membership, because they come along with us because they believe the same thing. But we've got all sorts of things going on. We've got schools where streaming is imposed upon them. And streaming is nothing like setting. They're totally different things. We've got schools where the classes are mixed, but there are sets inside the class, which again is a completely different thing. You know, so every kind of makeup we can possibly imagine, because the group is so large. But yeah, on the whole, I think that this idea of the central thing that we promote is that people learn at different rates from different models, metaphors, and examples, but everyone can learn well. Everyone can learn well. And on the whole, that's what our membership is. It's full of schools who truly believe that as well. It doesn't mean that any of them have achieved it, right? So,
Yeah.
I don't know a school that exists in the world where every 15-year-old has learned every single thing they were supposed to learn at the time. All sorts of things happen. Things get in the way. Life gets in the way. But having that aspiration and having the fundamental belief that everyone can learn well is what we really push more than anything. So yeah, it's a big mixed bag of people.
Yeah, no, we got some comments going. We got Rebecca. Good conversation. Yeah, and again, yeah, it just comes down to that certain belief that every child can learn. It's just a matter of time, isn't it? So when it may be that they're in year 11, halfway through year 11, and they need work with number bonds or something much earlier. But the GCSE is upcoming, and you have to make these decisions where is it worth teaching what you have to get them through to get a reasonable grade, or is it better just to teach them the correct maths so that they can learn from the point that they are. So these are the decisions you're faced with sometimes.
Yeah, that's the reality of it. But if the long term view is maybe if we just gave them a really exciting, interesting mathematics education, maybe the exams would be a breeze. Which I think is true. I think if you just teach children mathematics really, really well, get them completely up for it, lift them all up to the top, not leaving anyone behind. You don't have to worry about mock exams. You don't have to worry about measuring them and testing them. Just let them sit the exam at the end of year 11. They'll find it easy. But we've become so obsessed with measuring every step that they're making, and the amount of curriculum time that's given over to things that are not teaching children mathematics. It just seems odd to me. You could achieve a lot in all of that time with pupils, and just let them do the exams. If indeed you need to do the exams at all. But that's a whole other debate as to whether exams have to
performance
exist or
and
not.
learning.
It'll be interesting this year, won't it? But there are no exams this year. Will the world fall apart because there's no exams for this cohort? I'm going to place a £1 wager that the world will not fall apart because pupils don't sit their GCSE exams this year. I think we'll work it out and it will be okay. And I think they'll probably be able to progress through their lives all right without having, being forced to sit in an exam hall in June 2020. But who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I have a few year 11 tutees. Some of them finished anyway, but some of them are continuing. And what I'm getting from them is essentially they're being bridged for A levels if they wanted to do A level maths from GCSE, and if they were going to get the right grades, then the sort of bridging process starts now. And in some ways, they get that longer bridging period that you only get in the beginning of September, like straight away after the exams. So schools are already, or they may not want to do A level maths, in which case they specialize into another subject. So I'm sensing this from a few tutees that's what the schools are gonna plan, not their schools anyway. So they're kind of preparing them for their A levels rather than because at this point they can't further assess them anyway to figure out the grade that they will be giving them. So, yeah.
I'm sure it'll all work itself out eventually. It's, here where I am, most year 11s have got their national insurance numbers now, and they're out doing farm jobs during the day and earning a living. So I'm sure it makes it's a bit of a difference to which part of the world you're in or which part of the country you're in. But it'll all work itself out. The courses we're running at the moment, my team are running these big preparation for A-level courses and so on, being really well received. And there is an opportunity now for pupils to start specializing and start getting ready for their A-levels in a way they wouldn't have had before. This entire period would be, if you were 15, if you were in year 11, this entire period is kind of written off, isn't it? It's written off with revising, reviewing, getting ready for exams. There's quite a lot of year 11s choosing now to continue learning instead, getting ready for their A-level exams. I'm really surprised and quite humbled by just how many pupils have signed up for our preparation for A-level and preparation for Scottish Highers courses. It's amazing. Maybe that's a better use of May, June, July. Maybe continuing to learn would be a better use of their time.
At a more slow, relaxed pace, because we often tutors say these summer slide and things where they try and keep their year 11s going into year 13. That's brilliant. So yeah, we've come to the hour. Yeah, not as bubbly questions as last time. I suppose everyone's kind of out and about and things have settled, which is great as well. Well, maybe yeah. I know you're doing these courses. You just talked about it now as well. This essentially what private tuition at a very very affordable, and if they're with complete maths, it's free as well. So if you just mentioned that, a plug to that, I think that'd be great. I'm happy to plug that. I'm doing that on my networks as well. And
yeah, the courses we're running. So there's a bunch of different courses on the Complete Maths site. They are specifically for disadvantaged pupils. And as I'm sure everyone is aware, that in this time, of course, people are filling in education with tuition. And, that's fine if you're middle class and you have some disposable income and you can pay for your child to have a tutor. That's great. So what we've put on are these very specific courses for disadvantaged pupils. And anyone that's complete maths school, so that's thousands and thousands and thousands of children. Anyone that's complete maths school, they don't pay for it. They can just go straight onto it. And then anyone who's not a complete maths school, we're asking them for a contribution of £1 per session. So £1 per session is, it's a nominal charge. Really, it exists because if you don't have a nominal charge, people won't show up and things like that, and it means you've given a space away to someone that someone else could have had, and so on. So we do have this nominal charge for schools that are not members. So the courses are 30 taught sessions, and so 30 quid basically if you're not a member, but most of the people on it are members, so they're not paying anything. And they're running every day. And we've got people like Jonathan Hall and Gary Lamb, Rob Smith teaching these courses. They seem to be going really well so far.
No, yeah, Robert Smith just replied, and he's just to confirm, it's called a virtual school, so it's done all online.
Okay,
that's what he's saying here.
Virtual school. Yeah. Okay. I was good of Rob to chip in and tell the chief exec off for not knowing what the things are called. But, yeah, I think it's okay for me to not know what the hell's going on, but as long as those guys do. Yeah, but it's really, I'm very pleased that they're doing it. I'm really proud of them for doing it. But there's so many pupils out there who they have no option to pay for tutoring, no option at all. The Sutton Trust report last year was really interesting, looking at that. About a quarter of children have private tuition, and then Sutton Trust put a report out day before yesterday, looking at how the gap between advantaged and disadvantaged children is just going crazy at the moment. Those children are being well left behind. So what we'll do as well is extend those courses over the summer and into the autumn, such that we can continue to lift people up and fill in any gaps that they may have. And like I say, for disadvantaged pupils, there are 1.9 million pupils in England on pupil premium. So that's about the bottom quarter, bottom 23%, something like that. Really, we're interested in probably the bottom decile here, the bottom 10% of pupils. And we're not, I don't expect parents to pay £1 a session. We're asking the schools. So the schools say that we want to put this pupil here onto it. And if they put them onto a 30 session course, it's 30 quid. And obviously that pupil will be supported by pupil premium. I think 30 quid for a school is perfectly appropriate to help us fund it and make that provision now. So yeah, completemaths.com if people want to.
Virtual school, yeah. No, that's fantastic, because I'm in a lot of tutor communities as well, and tutors get inquiries all the time, and depending on where the parent is, they may or may not be able to afford it at that particular price point. I've recommended virtual school on my website. I'll ask other tutors to do the same, like as much just the idea that this help is available to those who need it. And Rob Smith, Jonathan Hall, one of the very, very best out there. Like, this is really, really high quality education. Like, I've known these teachers through various events, CPD. It is, not overselling this by any means. These are really, really high quality intervention education available for pretty much nothing. So, it's something I hope more and more people just take up, and you may have to be putting up with really huge demand and some getting others. But I think that's a great thing. Yeah.
Great, thanks very much. Yeah, they are really good guys. It's a great course. So, yeah, hopefully we'll get some more people there, and we'll rerun the courses as well if needs be. If the numbers get too high, we'll just put on extra sessions.
Great. Okay. Well, just over an hour, so we'll wrap it up there. Yeah, thanks for everyone that's tuned in. Just post some questions. This is the recording of this thing will be up there, so I've got it on YouTube, etc. So we'll just put it out there. And if you have any question, just reply to either one of us on Twitter, and be glad to take it. Yeah. And thanks again for your time, Mark. And yeah, catch you again soon. I'll stop the stream, and then we'll just have a quick chat, and we can finish up. All right.
Great. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.